Hi there, it's Blair with Wisecraft Handmade, and it's time for Quilting and Answer Thursday. Each week I share video tips right here to help us all be better quilters, except I didn't share a video tip last week because last week was a disaster. Today we're going to talk about sewing stilettos. Do you know what they are? Do you use them? Maybe after this video, you may decide to give them a try. So the sewing stiletto is very different from the stiletto shoes. And I know I don't wear those, but I use a sewing stiletto every single day. Now, I didn't understand the need for a sewing stiletto. When I first started sewing, I'd never even heard of it. Now I use it all the time, and really it's almost like having an extra hand or an extra few fingers. It allows me to hang on to things with a little more precision and get a little closer to the presser foot than I would want my fingers to get, for example. It's just a really helpful, useful little tool, but you have to kind of get used to using it. Now, I have several different kinds of stilettos in my studio. Some are very sharp and they have very pointy ends. Some are pointy, but maybe they have a slightly more blunt tip. I've learned that different ones work really well for different tasks, but you might be surprised to learn what my favorite type of stiletto is. So I am a collector of vintage sewing tools, and I love learning about vintage sewing notions and things like that. And I was very surprised to learn that long ago in the Victorian era and even before that, that a lot of sewers used a porcupine quill as a stiletto. It was used the same way that they might use a pin or something to hold things in place. I was fascinated, and I actually found years ago a jewelry supply company that sold naturally shed porcupine quills. I have a collection of these in my sewing studio. So I keep most of them hidden because my cat loves these, but they're really cool. First of all, the fact that an animal in the world can be covered with things like this that are so pointy on one end is absolutely fascinating to me. Secondly, the ends of these are super duper pointy, man. It's crazy how pointy they are. It's almost like using a pen instead of using an actual pen. So I really like these a lot. I think you would probably have to look at jewelry supply places, or if you can find some naturally shed porcupine quills, try them because they're really cool. So let me tell you 3 ways that I use a sewing stiletto. There's probably more that I didn't even think of, but these are 3 main ways that I use a sewing stiletto. So whenever we want to line up 2 points as we sew, our first instinct is to pin them, to hold them together. Maybe if it's a really fiddly intersection, we may pin with several pins, right? One pin might not do it, but actually too many pins isn't good either, and it can actually skew your straight stitching line and make you not as precise. So however, if you use a sewing stiletto, so if I want to line up these 2 points and I have my presser foot here, I can just press my sewing stiletto onto the fabric, and it actually acts as a pin, and it keeps them all together. And you know how sometimes the end of your seam tends to want to shift a little bit left or right? I just always hold my sewing stiletto right at the end, and it just guides through perfectly. When we're sewing long strips of fabric, like a jelly roll strip, a 2.5 inch wide strip, If we're going to sew these two together, we're going to line them up one on top of the other, and we're going to guide them through our machine and sew. Our tendency is to often take the top strip and actually pull on it even ever so slightly, just to line it up with the strip below it before it gets to the presser foot, with the idea that we're keeping them, you know, even going through the presser foot. But what happens is it pulls the top strip through the presser foot or under the presser foot at a different rate than the bottom strip, which is being pulled along by the feed dogs. And so a lot of times if you sew two strips together, you're going to get bowing because the tension for the top strip was a little bit tighter than the tension for the bottom strip from all that pulling. In comes the sewing stiletto. So if I line these up, just gently place this one over the one below it, right sides together. And as I'm sewing, if the presser foot is coming across the fabric, I'm only worried about just the next few inches that are going to be going under the presser foot. I gently place them and hold them with the presser foot. It goes through. The rest of the strip is in my lap. I'm lining up the next section and holding it. I'm not pulling on the top at all. It creates a more evenly done strip, long strip, with a little less bowing. If I am basting around, say, a pillow with piping, and I'm going to add piping around the outside of the pillow front, and I want to baste it on before I sew everything together, that's going to be several layers. And a stiletto is great for just holding all of that nice and stacked like you want it before it goes into the presser foot, without trying to like stick pins into the length of that. Usually it would bend your pins anyway. So this is really helpful for guiding, because I can have this hold layers in place basically until they get under the presser foot and then let go and move it on down. I would never let my finger get that close to the presser foot and the needle. So you can find stilettos everywhere, and you can even make some yourself if it's helpful. Aside from the porcupine quill, which I told you that I love, I have a hand-turned wooden stiletto tool. It's a combination tool, seam ripper on one side and stiletto on the other, that my mother-in-law gave me, that I really enjoy using. You can find some like this that have a cover, and this could hang it from something if you wanted to around your neck, but that one's really good. Most of them are pretty pointed, but I also have this bamboo one, which is, it's got a more blunt tip. It's not as pointed, but I have specific things that I use this for, that I prefer to use this for over the pointed ones. So my suggestion is try some different stilettos, experiment with using it. It will feel a little awkward at first, but it's pretty easy to get used to. And you may find, like me, that you really don't need to pin much at all anymore after you really get used to using a stiletto. So let's hear from you. Do you use a stiletto, or are you inspired to try one out? Let me know in the comments, and find even more tips, patterns, tools, and tutorials at my website, Wisecraft Handmade. Be sure and subscribe to my channel on YouTube or on IGTV for new videos every Thursday. I will see you next week.